worried about that. Like, is it does the fact that people know who you are make you famous or infamous? But thank you so much, everyone, for coming along today. I mean, I just thought, you know what, I'd have a few people, we'd have a bit of a chat over lunch, but it's great to see so many of you here. I'm going to just share my screen. I put some stuff down on paper last night, and I guess I'll just use it as a way to just, so can everybody see my screen now? It currently says 10 things I've learned, all right? And the first thing I've learned about startups is that, like, forget about numbers, because there isn't 10 here, actually. There's 13 things I've learned, because everything in startups will always be more than you actually think it's going to be. This is a bunch of stuff that I guess I've been lucky enough in my career to work with some incredible entrepreneurs. My current role, I run the First Fridays for Startups, an ecosystem activity in Dogpatch Labs in Dublin, even though I'm a Cork native and I live in Cork still. I just happen to come to Dublin every now and again. I've also worked as Chief Commercial Officer and COO of CityDoc. CityDoc is the second largest private COVID testing company in the UK. So I had a very interesting COVID. Before that, obviously, and always my love, I spent 5 years as the CEO and founder of Republic of Work in Cork, which I believe you probably know all about. And then I guess before that, look, my startup career started in both, I was the VP of Growth and Marketing and first commercial employee at Teamwork in Cork. And then I was Chief Marketing Officer of Trustev, which was Pat Phelan's first technology business before he decided that beauty was more important and got into the Botox business. On top of that, look, I'm involved in a whole bunch of other startup related stuff. I sit on the government's board on SME growth and entrepreneurship. And I was recently appointed to the Enterprise Digital Advisory Forum, which basically means it's my job to explain virtual reality to politicians and government departments. That's definitely something I will be asking the startup community in Ireland for help with. I've divided the stuff I want to talk into a couple of different sections, from getting started to, we're going to cover things like getting started. We're going to cover stuff like sales and marketing. We're going to cover stuff like fundraising, which is, I think, a particular one a lot of people are interested in, especially the learnings from it. And I'm going to talk then about some miscellaneous ones. And as said then, genuinely, I love answering questions. So I've left some time at the end in particular for, there's no such thing as a stupid question, only the stupid answer that I'll probably give you. The first thing I want to say about something I've learned is it has never, ever been easier in Ireland to start a business than it is right now. But it's also never been harder to actually succeed. And why I say that is we are very, very lucky. As somebody who has a lot of exposure to the international entrepreneurship ecosystems, both I've lived and worked in the US, I've lived and worked in the UK. For all the moaning that we hear in Ireland, Ireland is one of the most supportive countries in the world for entrepreneurship. That maybe is setting a low bar in terms of what other countries do. But I mean, you know, other countries don't have organizations like, you know, enterprise boards, Enterprise Ireland, and things like that. So as much as sometimes you can hear people complain about bureaucracy and paperwork, please understand that you're working from a position of privilege to a certain degree compared to your counterparts in other countries. We have an amazing support system here. Everything can always be improved, but I mean, you know, we mentioned earlier things like NDRC, the pre-accelerator program that Republic of Work are about to run their you know, is probably one of the top startup programs in Europe right now, especially given that it's completely free.
I think you're gone on mute there, or else your internet's gone, DC. Let us know if you can hear him, or is it just gone for me?
No, he's gone.
No, he's gone.
He's frozen in mid-sentence. Oh.
Yeah. We'll give it a second and see if he comes back.
Because he said it was free.
Yeah, cut him off. Okay, I think he...
Hey guys, I'm back. I don't actually know what happened there.
You're back is all about it.
Yeah, I'm back. I actually have no idea what happened there. It just died on me. So what I was about to say was, we have an incredible amount of resources out there for a small business. The thing to realize about starting a business is that starting a business, it starts with 100% of the work is yours to do. Everything else is a bonus. So, I mean, we never want a scenario in Ireland where, starting a business is like a social welfare system. Like, it's not. What I mean by that is, you're entitled to nothing just because you've decided to start a business. You have to, the goal as a startup founder, the goal as an entrepreneur is to try and lighten your load by getting as much help as possible. But as such, you got to fight for everything you do. And I think right now we're in a world where, has never been so many people trying to start businesses, which actually means that a lot of the resources that are available are often very taxed in terms of the number of people that are allowed to engage and allowed get involved. So from that point of view, that's what I mean by it's never been harder, because you have to work for everything. Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry, it just went dead there for a second again. So next, number 2, start small but be ambitious. Is based on my experience working in high growth technology companies. So the idea that, you start small and you scale big. I think some of this advice, what I would say is, you've got to realize, are you a traditional SME? Are you building, a jam company that as you scale the business, everything gets more expensive because you have to build factories and you have to build other things? Or are you building, a software company where the bigger you get, the actual cheaper things get? In terms of, because as everybody knows, with something like software, once you've it built, the cost of producing another unit of software is basically zero. So I would say, start small, but be very ambitious. Do not be one of these companies that says, we're going to start in Cork, and then we're going to grow to Galway, and then we're going to go to Limerick, and then we're going to go to Dublin. Be a company that starts in Cork, and your next move is going to be, we're going to be in the UK, we're going to be in the US. Be ambitious, because it's going to be the same amount of work, really, whether you decide to be ambitious or not. The other part of this is, to get where you're going, you need to know where you're going. And what I often say with this is, so a lot of people start their businesses and they don't think much about where they want to get to in the end of their business. So if you're a company who has a plan to go out and take venture capital or get investment from investors, when you start your business, you have to know that at some point those investors are going to want their money back. So at some point, the kind of, in America, they would tell you that if you are starting a software company, you have to have a path to the day where you're doing $100 million in revenue. I don't think it has to be that extreme. But as an example, if you're doing a business where your intent is that you want to work in this business for the entire rest of your life, that is a business that is a very different animal. That here's a business that I want to build for 10 years and I want to then go off and I want to sell it to Google, or I want to build a jam company and my plan is in 10 years time, I want to sell it to Keelings. I think this is the part of entrepreneurship where you have to look inside yourself and going am I looking at a job to create financial security for me and my family? Am I looking to create a job that is something where I'm passionate about this space and I want to work in it for the rest of my life? Nothing happens without money. So the big thing that I think a lot of companies fail to realize is approximately 90% of all businesses are not suitable for venture capital. One of the things I've noticed over the last 5 years in particular in Ireland is a lot of people starting businesses with the assumption that they're going to be able to go out and get investors. And that is really not the way to ever think about your business, because the reality is the sort of businesses that venture capitalists are allowed to invest in are very, very specific businesses. It's a very, very tiny number of businesses. Primarily, if you imagine, the very simple fact is that if you engage with a venture capitalist, it's not their money. They're investing money on behalf of the pension funds. They're investing money on behalf of the bank. They're investing money on behalf of the university. And they have given very strict guidance, what they are and aren't allowed to invest in. So the reality is you may have a brilliant idea and they may be tremendously excited about it, but it's kind of like going to a bank. You can have a great relationship with a bank manager when you're going in talking about your mortgage, and you can walk out of there going, God, they were a lovely person and I think I'm going to get my mortgage. But the reality is they process your information, computer says no, and you don't get it. So for me, I always say to people, like, assume that your business is not suitable for venture capital and build your model, how you're going to finance your business based on something else. That way, when it does, if you are able to raise venture capital, it's a bonus. It's never let it be something you rely on. I've learned this one multiple ways myself. Never take money from strangers. The other mistake I see people when they go out looking for investors is that they treat it as a marketing exercise. We had it with First Fridays, the program I run. We had it recently. A lot of people, when we ask them what they need mentoring in, they say, "Oh, I want marketing help." And then when I ask them what they need marketing help for, they're like, "Oh, we need help marketing to investors." That's not what fundraising is. The thing about taking money from anyone, whether they're an angel investor, whether they're a venture capitalist or anyone, is you are bringing a new business partner into your business. Like, no matter what way you do it, this is not a bank loan. Anybody that you take investment from, they own a part of your business. They may be involved on a day-to-day basis. They may not be involved in a day-to-day basis. But the reality is, don't take money from strangers. Like, the reality is you need to make sure that the people that you are trying to get to invest in your business, you know them, you know what they're passionate about, you know that they're interested in your business. There's nothing worse than what I call dumb money, just taking money for the sake of it. If you're going to be working with somebody, if you're going to be spending their money, you need to know them, and you need to have a very cordial, very fun, very good working relationship. When I founded Republic of Work, I was very, very lucky to find a brilliant business partner and investor in Dave Ronayne, and then later Dan Kiley, because they knew what they were good at in the business, and they knew what I was good at, and we had this great relationship. On the other hand, if I had gone out and taken money from people who I didn't know, or people who had a different outcome, if I had people who were ruthless about money, as opposed to both Dave and Dan, who were passionate about seeing entrepreneurship grow in Cork, the outcomes would be completely different. So, like, always take money from people who you know, in the sense that they're going to do due diligence on you. They're going to dig in. They're going to find out everything about you, what you're into, what motivates you. You should do the exact same thing before you decide. And you should be then targeting the people that you want to invest in your business, not treating it like a mail merge where you send something out to as many investors as possible. In terms of raising money, raise capital in stages as you remove risk. This is a very complicated way of saying the worst possible thing that you can do is out and fundraise, out and get to put $5 into your bank account, and it's sitting in your bank account, and then you're just spending it every single month. Because the reality is when you take investment on, you obviously give up shares and give up an equity in your company. The less risky your business is, the less you have to give away. So somebody once called this to me just-in-time fundraising, which is the idea that, like, if you want to make sure that you retain the maximum amount of equity in your business, you should raise your capital in stages as you remove risk. So, like, if you only need 100,000 to get you through the next year, then only raise 100,000, because you should have an open working relationship with your investors where halfway through that 100,000, you can re-evaluate the situation. But, like, there's nothing worse than sitting there with just money in a bank account without any plans on how to spend it, how to deploy it. I mean, you know, what's the point in having 2 years' money in a bank account if you're executing right now? You'd be better off having 1 year's money and then going off in 6 months' time and raising another year's money and being able to get it at a better price. I think I've covered this already in what I was saying. Smart money is better than cheap money, but I do want to kind of reiterate it. I often, when you go looking to raise money, you will get multiple offers from different people. And a lot of people tend to kind of rank that in terms of, well, who's offering us the most money for the least amount of equity? And that's a really, really short-sighted way of looking at it, because, you know, you have to look at the context of everything. I mean, you know, if, you know, some private equity company comes to me and says, hey, we'll give you 100,000 euros for 10% of your company. And if somebody like Dan Kiley, it comes to me from Cork and says, DC, I'll give you 100,000, but I want 15% of the company. I go with Dan Kiley all day, every day. Why? Because not only will Dan give me money, Dan will also give me the global connections that he's built up. He'll give me all of his expertise. Because think about it, like, your investors, they only want one thing for your business, and that's for your business to succeed. Because if your business succeeds, their investment becomes worth more money. So again, like, it's really important that when you think about fundraising, you don't think of it in terms of, you know, the kind of bank loan, bank manager mentality. You're bringing on a business partner, and would you rather have a smarter business partner or a stingier business partner? I'd rather have the smart business partner all day, every day. Here's one that I've learned first experience: save surprises for birthdays, not for your stakeholders. What I mean by stakeholders is not just investors. I mean investors, I mean partners, I mean employees, anybody else who is connected into your business. Like, surprises, everybody hates surprises. I know for a fact, for having had the experience, the king of this whole world is Pat Phelan from Sisu and Viv. Like, you have to be 100% transparent with the key stakeholders in your business. You have to tell them. Pat used to have this old trick on a Friday morning. He used to send all of his investors and all of his stakeholders what I used to call the good, bad, and ugly email, where he'd tell them, hey, here's the good news this week. We've done this in sales. Hey, here's the bad news this week. We lost this deal. You know, this happened, whatever. And in the ugly news, oh, by the way, you know, we're being sued by Disney for whatever. If you maintain an utterly transparent relationship with people, it just makes all the difference. I was listening to a podcast actually this morning with Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank in America, and he had this really simple insight, which was like, you know, if you're always telling the truth and if you're always straight up with people, you don't have to expend any brain power in trying to remember your lies or trying to remember what you told them. So I think it's really important that if you want to have a long-term success for your business, and again, as I said, this goes beyond investors. This is also your partners. This is also your employees. Like, you know, the ability to be transparent with your employees, especially in a startup. I mean, you know, if you're running a big company like Dairygold or Kerry Group or Musgraves, obviously there's a lot of confidentiality within you know, the business in terms of everything from salaries to money to all this sort of stuff. If you're doing a startup, like you're a company of one, you're a company of two, you're a company of four, you're a company of six. I know that I would much rather be in a scenario where we started off every Monday morning knowing, you know, being fully transparent about what was going on in the company, and we were finishing every Friday feeling like we were a team and that we were all contributing in and that we all knew how much money was in the bank. We all knew what was going on. And I think in the early days of, if you can build that sort of transparency into the early days of your startup, it creates, you know, everybody talks about company culture. Like you can't retrofit culture. Like, it just doesn't happen. Like, have a transparent culture in your organization as you grow up. You got to start when you're two people, and you got to just build it so that the third person who comes in understands that transparency is at the heart of everything you do. My favorite topic, selling. So this is the one that everybody always finds a bit interesting, given that, you know, I spent most of my career working in marketing in one form or another. And there is degrees of I guess we call it, subtlety in this. But in the end of the day, the only reason that marketing exists in a business is to create commercial value. Like there's no value to marketing on its own, if you know what I mean. What I mean by that is, I've always said the primary role of a marketing function in a business, or the primary outcome, did we manage to sell stuff? And what I mean by that is, did the marketing function create enough opportunities for the sales function to actually achieve the commercials of the business? Because everything else is connected to that. I mean, people will talk about employer branding. People will talk about, exposure for the company. But I mean, again, like both of those, why do you do employer branding? You do employer branding because you want to hire the very, 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 very best people, and hiring the very, very best people optimizes the commercials of your business. So I think it's really important to never think of marketing and sales as two separate functions. I think there is what you're seeing in an awful lot of big companies right now is like, for instance, when I was a CMO, people don't realize, like within a lot of big American companies, the CMO, the chief marketing officer, like the entire sales organization also reports into them. So it's not really a chief marketing officer. It's like your job is run marketing and sales. What's happened in a lot of companies over the last 5 or 6 years is this new position of CCO, which is chief commercial officer, or the other one is CRO, which is chief revenue officer. We had an event at Dogpatch last Friday, First Fridays for Startups. We had an incredible panel on business development, and one of the people on the panel, Colm Long, he's the CRO of one of our unicorns here in Ireland, soon to be a unicorn, Times. Colm, is the CRO of this startup, but like Colm has previously served as a VP in Google, a VP in Facebook, and he was actually managing director of Facebook in Ireland. And that's because Colm has an amazing ability to pull together the sales part of an organization and have them define very clearly what is the product that we're selling, and then handing that to the marketing specialists and having the marketing specialists work out the best way to communicate the company's value proposition out. So all I'm saying is, like, I don't ever recommend the what I call the hotel solution. I don't think a sales and marketing manager is ever a good idea, because I think the brain set to be a good salesperson and the brain set to be a good marketeer are opposite sides of the brain. But I don't think you should ever have these two parts of the business operating in separate channels. I know in my early career, before I got into tech, when I was working in marketing in places like Red Bull and stuff, you'd get incredibly frustrated when somebody would arrive and say, oh, well, the sales target for the month is, to sell 100,000 cans of Red Bull. And you're like, are the marketing team going to get no say into, what we think is capable in terms of selling? So that's really, honestly, if I could tell you one lesson, I think that's the big one for me. Always go deep, never go wide. Startups have a huge problem with this. Startups, because of maybe they have a lack of confidence in their product, they always think that putting it in front of the maximum number of people is a good idea. Put it in front of only 10% of people are going to buy our product. So if we put it in front of 10,000 people, 1,000 people will buy. If we put it in front of 100,000 people, 10,000 will buy. That's made up stuff in your head. The most important thing in the early stages of a startup is that you go deep in terms of customer engagement. When you're in the early stages of a business, the most valuable thing for your business, even more valuable than money, is the customer understanding. Because if long-term you're going to build a sales and marketing model that's going to be able to, maximize sales for you, you have to understand exactly why your customer is making a buying decision. And if you are trying to sell, if you are selling a product and you are trying to sell it to old people, young people, married people, babies, teenagers, it is so much harder for you to understand those customer roadmaps than if you go, okay, well, this for the first 3 months of this year, we're only going to sell to the 60 plus market in rural Ireland. Well, then you will, every single penny you spend and every single resource that you expend in your marketing and sales efforts, you will be able to see the effect of that on that target audience. And if it's working, well, then you will understand how to deploy more resources and more money into that to get more out of it. If you deploy it in and if you get no sales out of it, well, then you will understand that the 60 plus rural market is not the market for us. So we're going to put that to one side and we're going to go off in this direction. If you're trying to juggle a half a dozen different customer targets, customer segments all at once, when you have the small resources a startup never usually has, it's going to be sheer and utter chaos. I mean, as a prime example, I mean, you know, if you get really technical, if you get into things like Google ads or TikTok ads or LinkedIn ads or any form of online advertising, if you are trying to target multiple segments, well, then you're in an awful state, because you're able to kind of, you know, if you really understand Google Analytics and Google Ads and stuff like that, you can do a certain amount of correlation between who's clicking on ads and who's buying, but it's really complicated. And if you're trying to do that for 5 different segments all at once, you're going to spend your entire day logged into Google Analytics and Google Ads. Always go deep in the early days, never go wide. It lets you not only find out who your customers are, it also lets you get insights in order to improve your customer, in order to improve your product. When we started Trustev, we thought Trustev was going to be an e-commerce anti-fraud solution that we were going to sell to individual e-commerce merchants for, I think it was something between 60 and 90 quid a month. It was going to be traditional SaaS. You know, if you were a hairy baby in Cork selling t-shirts, you'd sign up, you'd pay 90 quid a month, and that'd be it. By the time we sold Trustev, you know, the minimum possible amount of money that you could pay Trustev was about 50 to 100K a month, because we spent so much time going deep with those early e-commerce merchants. We realized that fraud wasn't a problem they cared about at scale, and that the only people who cared about fraud at scale were credit card companies, banks, etc. So we pivoted away from, you know, that deep engagement we had into an even deeper engagement, where literally we went from, you know, say having, you know, every e-commerce site in the world as a potential customer down to, you know, having probably 50 customers between banks and credit card companies in the total addressable market. B2C, B2B, enterprise, you know, it's like, what did they say? Fast, cheap, and good, pick 2. B2C, B2B, enterprise, pick 1. Probably one of the biggest problems that I see in startups is, yeah, most people understand whether they're in the B2C or B2B business. So like, are you selling direct to consumers or are you selling to businesses? That's an easy decision to make. Where a lot of startups literally where their businesses actually fail is not understanding the difference between B2B and enterprise. And what I mean by that is there is a huge difference between me selling a, hey, I started a donut company and I decided, you know, my options. I can sell donuts direct to the consumer. I can sell donuts to cafes, or I can sell donuts to, let's say, Musgraves. I mean, each of those, obviously, as you can see, has a completely different sales model, a completely different outcome, but also needs completely different resources. And what people fail to realize is a lot of people think that selling to Musgraves is just a bigger version of selling to a cafe. When the big difference is when you're selling to a business, you're usually still selling to a single decision maker. So you're going to a business and you're going to the relevant person for your product and you're saying, hey, I've got a product. Here's my value proposition. Here's how we can help you guys save money, time, whatever. You know, do you want to buy? And that person goes and they look at their budget and they go, hey, yeah, that would be good. I'll buy that. When you're dealing with an enterprise sale, so the example I would have is, you know, when I worked in Teamwork, we worked with Disney, PayPal, eBay, Netflix, a whole bunch of these companies. When you go to a company like Disney to sell to them, you know, you start by selling to the person who's going to get real value out of your product. So you start by, hi, you know, who's responsible in the company for productivity? Okay, it's the chief operations officer. Hey, we're going to sell you Teamwork. Here you go. You spend months and months of your sales cycle, connecting in with that person, getting them on board, showing them the value. But then, and they go, yeah, look, I think Teamwork is the solution for us. The next problem is they then have to go and get budget approval. The next thing is they have to connect you with their procurement team internally. And that procurement team, the basic factor is they don't care about productivity. They care about how much work is this Teamwork thing going to create for us. The security team don't care about productivity. They care about, right now, our system is entirely secure. Your new piece of software that comes in here creates a vulnerability that we're going to have to work out. That's why a lot of startups cannot sell to the enterprise, because a lot of enterprise companies, the very first thing they will do for every new supplier is a risk analysis. And they will say, what is the chance that this company is going to still be in existence in 3 years' time? If we start using this service, is there a chance that this company could go out of business? If so, that's risky a proposition. So for most companies, I kind of say, do not rush into trying to sell to the enterprise. I think selling to it took us probably about 2 years, if not 2.5 years, of developing our B2B business in Teamwork before we managed to close our first enterprise customer. Right now in Teamwork and in any company that sells to the enterprise, they will have a completely different sales team for the enterprise than they will for B2B engagements. On average, closing an enterprise sales deal is a 6 to 9 to 12 to 26 month process. Most startups cannot maintain the spend that it takes to get to the end of a sales cycle. And remember, you could engage for that 16, 18 months and only in month 17 find out that that the deal isn't happening. So pick one, and I would always recommend somebody pick one of the first two until your company is well enough resources that you can start making big bets, and you can basically afford to go, can we carry the cost of an enterprise salesperson for an entire 12 months without bringing in any revenue? If we can, maybe we should start dipping our toe into the water. If we cannot, stay as clear of it as you absolutely can. Anybody who has ever seen me speak in 13 years has heard this phrase, because it will be written on my tombstone. The greatest sin in marketing is attention without activation. There is nothing that wants me to punch people in the face quicker than, attention without activation. You suddenly, you're in a paper, you have something go viral on TikTok or Twitter, you rise above the parapet, all these 1,000 startups that exist in Ireland, I think 3,600 startups in Ireland, and you've been picked for the 30 under 30, you've won something. And what do you do with it? Absolutely nothing. You sit there and either you personally or your company gets a little ego boost from it. Do nothing. You don't have a call to action. You haven't sat down and gone, okay, well, I know we're going to be named 30 out of 30 in the Independent this weekend. How are we maximizing on that? Am I going to tweet, are we going to have a social media plan for the weekend? Are we going to push up the launch of something so that next week we can follow up on this announcement by announcing a cool new feature, and we get to name drop the fact that our co-founder was just named blah, 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 or whatever. It comes off so much, whether like any time that you do to create attention, you're speaking at an event, you're doing anything really that gets attention. Don't just do it for the sake of it. Always have a purpose, always have a plan for what you're going to do, what your ask is going to be. Like, if eyeballs are going to turn on you, know what your ask is. Sometimes you can just default to stuff. Sometimes, you often see people just throw in at the end, and we're currently hiring right now. If you're looking for a role, please visit teamwork.com, dogpatchlabs.com, whatever. But never just take attention for the sake of attention. Like, you're in a startup. You can't afford the time. Like, being 30 under 30, any of these accolades means absolutely nothing unless you can turn it into a benefit for your business. And yeah, that I'll go to death. I'll go to my grave with that on my tombstone, I think. A couple of other small ones here before we maybe do some Q&A. fix your process now. There won't be time later. I was a big fan for years of this. There was this famous saying, which was, you know, in a startup, you have to do things now that don't scale. I.e., you know, in the early days, you don't have a sales team. So, you know, the founders go and have to do the selling, and you don't have this and you don't have that. You don't have this resource. So you just have to do it all yourself. But I think what's really, really important is, like, especially when it's just you have to start trying to find the organization in the chaos. Like, you have to start, like, if you are, you know, if you're a founder of a company and you're doing all the sales yourself, you need to start tracking those sales. You need to start tracking your process. You need to start realizing, do you know what, like, I find it very easy at this point, but then, you know, whenever we send in the proposals or whenever we send in the quotations, that's where we lose them. It's very easy when you're in the busy bustle of a startup to kind of think of everything in these once-off things. But I mean, you know, if you do 10 sales deals and you realize that in all 10, you know, you can go back retrospectively and realize that in the 10 deals that you lost every one of them at the point where you sent your quotation. Like, that says something. Either your quotation was wrong, either you were asking for too much money, either you asked for money too early, you hadn't built confidence or value with the people. So, like, even at the earliest stage, I think a lot of people, you know, it goes for culture as well. You know, a lot of people think we'll work on culture later down the line. You know, we'll work on brand down the line. Like, your brand isn't what you say about you. Your brand is what other people say about you. And if you're a startup getting started and you have a reputation of being difficult to deal with, you have a reputation for, you know, over-promising or under-promising or over-promising and under-delivering, well, that's your brand. Like, that's what people are saying about you. And you can go out and you can say all the nice things you want on your website, but people will just remember at you as, well, they're the guys who they said they do this and they didn't do this. So I think it's so important that your job as a founder is to try and, you know, work out, like, as you're building your business, you have to build your processes. And eventually then you work out, okay, well, now I'm happy with the sales process, that now I'm happy bringing in a salesperson, because now I know they'll take all these learnings that I've developed as a founder and they'll take that and they'll turn that into the process. If I could beat this into the majority of technical founders that I know, I would, right? Don't scale your technology until it works. Now, that last word, works, is the challenge. Your technology, when I mean your technology works, I do not mean anything technical. I mean, don't scale your technology until it delivers meaningful value for your customer, right? Like, a lot of people in the technical side of a startup will keep working, will keep optimizing, will keep tweaking fonts, tweaking colors. Do you know what? We're building this platform now. We think we're going to get to 20 million customers, so we got to build in all this stuff. Until your product is validated by, you know, customers paying you money for it, don't be thinking too much about scaling your technology. Like, I'll give you a great example of that. Teamwork is the best example in the world of that. I mean, Teamwork for 6 years built a platform and added customers. And literally, you know, during my time at Teamwork, literally every single line of code that was ever written for Teamwork was thrown away. Peter Coppinger, who some of you might know, the co-founder of Teamwork, Peter went to South America for 6 months backpacking and came back with an entirely new code base for an entirely new Teamwork product that he just kind of built when he was in and out of hostels and stuff like that. And we retrospect the entire Teamwork platform. At that point, there was, I think, about 18,000 customers on the platform. But that's the first time that we actually spent a lot of time thinking about scaling the technology, because up at that point, we knew that people loved using software. We knew that it was a beneficial piece of technology because we had put it out in the market early and we had iterated on what our customers wanted. There is an awful danger when you're in a product-based company that you want a perfect product before you try and sell it. A perfect product is not a product that's in your head. A perfect product is one that actually excites your customer, that gets them delivering, that they turn around, they go, how much are we paying for this? I'd be happy to pay twice this. Until that sort of stuff starts happening, you don't have to worry about scaling your technology like this. Like, the amount of problems that you get scaling technology aren't going anywhere. You would be better off focusing on building a good product that's very much built on customer feedback. The other Cork example, I'm sorry to those of you who aren't in Cork, but like, all my examples are always going to be Cork companies. John and Joe from WorkVivo, who now, you know, have built this incredible software company that raised, I think, 23 million last week, have customers like every Nike employee in the world has WorkVivo on their phone. And their first customers were 2 hotels in Cork. And they spent 2 years basically building alongside. So every week they would physically meet the hotel managers for a cup of coffee, and they would basically say, what's working, what's not. And over time, the hotel managers gave them the feedback. They built this incredible product. And then, like, once they were 10 or 20 customers in, they started thinking about, okay, well, now how are we going to deal with the scaling challenges? How are we going to start onboarding 20 customers a day instead of maybe the 5 or 10 that we have? This is one that you know, it might sound cheesy, but it's true. About Ireland being a unique place to build a business. I'm going to kind of finish on the same topic. Ireland's startup ecosystem has superpowers. You have to use them. Like, you absolutely, if you do not engage and use the superpowers of the startup ecosystem in Ireland, you deserve to fail, because you are not doing right by your business. You will never, in any other ecosystem in the world, meet a nicer, more giving community of entrepreneurs than Irish entrepreneurs. I pretty much guarantee you there is every one of us has heroes. Every one of us has people we follow on Twitter, we follow on LinkedIn. We like how they talk, we like how they think, we like how they do business. I would be absolutely shocked if ever a scenario existed where you reached out to one of these people and they told you, get lost. I mean, an awful lot of my career is built on me reaching out. Pat Phelan, who gave me my first job and who's been a friend and mentor to me for many years. I reached out to Pat on Twitter and asked him for a cup of coffee one day, and then realized that if you want to put red rag to a bull, never email Pat Phelan asking him for a cup of coffee. That's not how Pat operates. Email him and ask him for 100 grand. Email him and ask him for direct asks. Do not ask him for casual stuff like, have you time for a coffee? Like, email him and say, hey, Pat, I'm having a problem with this. Would you have any suggestion for me? I use him as an example of, I've had the same experience with dozens of people. Colm Long, who spoke on the panel last Friday and First Fridays, I became friends with Colm over the years for the same thing. The MD of Facebook, turns out, was coming to live in Middleton. And I was like, he's somebody I think maybe I'd like to know. Reached out to Colm on LinkedIn, and hey presto, years later, we've a very good relationship. Irish entrepreneurs are some of the most giving entrepreneurs in the world. And all you have to do is ask. But there are some rules. You have to be respectful of their time, and you have to be respectful of the ask as well. I mean, if you were asking for a big favor from somebody, you got to think about, well, what? So, I mean, you know, if you want to email Pat Phelan and ask him for a favor, you know what? Maybe you go and you like some of his posts about Sisu. Maybe you go help him with distribution. You know, I know in Pat's life, some of the people who've been some of his best employees are people who kind of got onto him and said, hey, Pat, I've got an idea for you. You know, have you ever thought about marketing the business in this way? Have you ever thought about this? Like, the best way to get value out of the ecosystem is to put value into the ecosystem. I always segue by revealing also the fundraising secret, which is, you know, if you go raise money from venture capitalists anywhere in the world, you know, VCs are a very peculiar bunch. They have a set number of meetings that they can do every day. Let's call a spade and say your average VC can do no more than 3 meetings with up and coming startups. So, you know, if you make the pilgrimage and you go to Sand Hill Road in San Francisco to try and meet as many VCs as you can in a week, here's the factor. You are competing, you know, that like there's more VCs per square foot on that stretch of road than anywhere else in the world. But you are competing against thousands of startups who come every week, looking for, we call it 15 meeting slots in a week. The great thing about being Irish is you have a secret meeting slot, because Irish people are the only people in the world who can turn around to the same VC and say, come here, I know you're probably busy all day. Could I meet you for a pint after work? And I've had it work for me so many times where I don't know whether it's that the partners or VCs or the people I'm looking to meet are just curious about what it's like to have a pint with an Irish person. I should clarify here, I don't drink. But for the sake of a business, I'll sneak a pint of Guinness if I have to, you know. But what I mean by that is, you know, again, Irish people, we are seen as being very, very good networkers, very cordial people, kind of, let's call a spade a spade. We're seen as being a good bit of crack. There's a reason why, as a small country, you know, we also have people in, you know, every major industry around the world. And it's because Irish people are liked. And while you should never exploit that, you should row into it. You should go, how can we deliver value? How can we get it back, you know? That's it. That's kind of what I have to say. I'm happy. Like, coming up with 10 was hard. Coming up with 13 was even harder. I think I started with about 25 and cut down. I'd love in the little bit of time we have left here, if anybody has a very particular question that they'd like answered, I'd absolutely love to just take the time to answer it.
Yeah. So I think, Clydie, I see your hand is up there. If you want to ask a question, you can go ahead.
You know what? I was just clapping, but
oh, clapping. Okay.
Just stood there.
It's hard to tell the difference.
Just thank you, DC. That was great. I mean, it's how do you see? We're talking about Cork now. How do you see the scene and the environment for startups in Cork at the moment?
I think there's a lot. I think Cork is in a very interesting place at the moment. I think there's an awful lot of really, really interesting stuff going on. I think we need to get. I think, frankly, the one thing I would say in Cork at the moment, I think we need to get more ambitious. I think what we have seen in Cork over the last couple of years is an awful lot of blending of our startup ecosystem, so that, like as somebody who spends, you know, a fair bit of time outside Cork, what I will tell you is kind of unique about Cork is, in Cork we talk about startups, and we kind of use it to refer to any new SME, like so, you know, you'll hear of jam company startups, and you'll hear of all sorts of stuff. Like that's a very uniquely Cork and very uniquely Irish thing. And I think one of the challenges is that, as you know, the more you blend different ecosystems together, the more the advice becomes very difficult to give. Like, I mean, if for instance I was on a call here today and I knew that everybody on the call here was a software startup, you know, I could give massive value in terms of very specific, very targeted tactics. The same with fundraising. I could tell you, okay, well, in order to raise money, you need to have your lifetime, you know, you need to have a customer acquisition cost of this and lifetime value of this, blah, 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 blah. We've in Cork, we've kind of, like, even though we have some of the most amazing enterprise software companies to come out of Ireland, we've just done, we have to be very careful of how our ecosystem develops. And look, what I will say is, look, there's a bunch of conversations. I'm involved in a bunch of conversations. I think Cork has massive potential. I mean, look, as a city, we're hands down the best economic region in Ireland. Government has committed, with my old Cork Chamber board member hat on, government has committed that between now and 2040, Cork is going to be the fastest growing region in Ireland. We're going to double. We're going to see a 50% increase in population. What does this mean in practicality? Practicality, it means when government budgets are doing, they now have to give us more money than they were going to give us previously. So I'm very optimistic about the startup ecosystem, but I think one of the things I mentioned there is people need to be a lot more ambitious, and companies need to move an awful lot faster. There are no end of supports there. But the example I always give is, like, when we started Trustev, you know, we started in August. By the previous August, by the following August, so 12 months, we started in August, we went public in January. That October at the Web Summit, we announced a $3.2 million VC raise, at the time the largest seed round in European history. And, you know, 3 years later, we sold the company for 43 million. Now in Cork, you will see companies who will take, you know, they'll spend their first 3 years involved in programs, trying to build the perfect product before they go out and talk to companies. I think move faster. What's Mark Zuckerberg used to say, move fast and break things. In startups, that's kind of the default philosophy, has to be moving fast. Like nothing you do in a startup should be measured in months and weeks. It should be, how many days is it going to take us? Is it a question of, are we getting that done this week or next week? Not, are we getting this done this week or next month?
That's brilliant. Thank you.
I think we have time for one last question. I think I saw one there. It was, oh yeah, where did your passion to help startups come from Emma?
Where did my passion for startups come from? I have no idea. I guess, look, here's a very simple one. I worked with some amazing entrepreneurs. Like I worked with, as I said, I mean, from a Cork perspective, I worked with some of the greats like Dan and Lynn Kiley, Pat Phelan, Peter and Dan in Teamwork. Like, what I would say is, like, I was working with some of the most passionate, stubborn, bold entrepreneurs that have ever existed. But that's what you have to be an entrepreneur. And from my point of view, you know, I always felt like I always worked kind of behind them to resource. And at an early stage, I realized myself that, you know, I have entrepreneurial tendencies, but I'm not an entrepreneur. Like I am very much, I'm the support structure. And that's why I always think of myself, and why I love what I do on a day-to-day business. I want to build the best ecosystem out there to let startup founders succeed, because having started businesses myself, I know how hard it is, and I know how lonely a road it is. And I guess I've just seen, like, I've learned from the best, and the one thing the best always have is they always have a support structure. You know, those of you who know Pat Phelan will see his occasional comments where, you know, he frequently on Instagram references conversations with Liam Casey, you know, his mentor. Like, everybody who has a startup, well, what I would say is, you know, you don't need to have a formal mentor, but you gotta pick the people you want to be like. Pick, you know, reach out and ask for advice. And I mean that, you know, there are people who are entrepreneurs, there are people who are good advisors, and I like to think of myself in the second bucket. I learn and I educate myself, and I feel lucky that I've had the practical experience. But I don't. Will I ever start another business? Probably not, you know.
Okay, good answer. I think we'll wrap it up there just because we're approaching 2 o'clock. I'm sure some people might be hungry. So yeah, thanks again, DC. That was really informative. Lots to take away as well. And yeah, hopefully we'll have you again soon on another one.
Definitely. If I can help anybody out, there's 2 easy ways to get me. One is dc@dogpatchlabs.com. And if it sounds like too long a thing for you to write, my email is just me@dc.ie. So one of those. If I can help anybody, connect to anybody, you know, just proof that you were all listening. All right. Don't email me dumb things like ask for a cup of coffee. Email me, I need help with this, or I need help with this. And if I can connect to somebody, I'll do that. And just from a plug point of view, again, honestly, the NDRC pre-accelerator at Republic of Work, if you are at the point where you're not sure what's next for your business, that's what the NDRC pre-accelerator does. By the end of the process, you will have certainty in almost all aspects of your business. And look, I'll probably be mentoring on it. They get some really world-class mentors involved in it on a weekly basis. It's an evening thing for the most part, so it's not a massive drain, but it is very, very competitive. So I would suggest that if you want to get in on it, you got to start. Today's the day for the application, not tomorrow.
Great. Thanks a million, DC. And thank you for everyone coming on. It was a great turnout, and we'll see you again at the next one. Thanks, everyone.